Hello, I'm Neil Mossey. Welcome to the Happy Huts, and thank you for clicking on this. Welcome to the very first episode of the Podcast Producers Podcast. I feel like there should be music playing at the moment or something. That will come in time with other episodes, but this is the first one, and I am very excited. And by excited, I mean I'm terrified. I've got this going out on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. Hello YouTube, if you're watching there. And if you're listening on the audio podcast, there's a link in the description to where the YouTube videos are. And if you're watching on YouTube, there's a link in the description for where the audio podcast is and where the website is. So I'm really pleased that you're here. If you're watching on YouTube at this point, I'm probably going to stop looking at the camera now, just so I can give my all to this as an audio podcast. But you're in good hands. I've actually already recorded the first episode, but I wanted to record and upload this thing first. I wanted to record an introduction, partly to test, to make sure that everything works, but mostly I just wanted to get an episode in the can and online to get the Podcast Producers Podcast going. My background is in TV, radio and online production. With the things I've produced and written, maybe there's one or two of them that you might have heard of if you are in the UK, but it's a lot of stuff. I've recently made a couple of podcasts, and one of them has turned out wonderfully. I'm really proud of it. It's a closed series, so it's just a small number of episodes, and I'm really pleased with how that's come out. But the other podcast is an open and ongoing series, and I've hit this complete wall with it. I can only describe it as a podcast wall, and I can't get past it. So I've started reaching out to people I know who've been making podcasts, and what's been really comforting is that the people I've been talking to, it looks like they have a podcast producer's wall as well. They have obstacles that they've had to get around, and they're actually grappling with different problems that I haven't even thought of yet. Yesterday I went to have a chat with one of my really closest long-time friends, Stuart, and he is involved in a podcast that has recently been released. We were talking about some of the things that have come up and how he's actually got this podcast made. And we were talking for a while, and we were going so deep into talking about podcasts and how you make them that I asked him if I could record the conversation. I got my phone out, put it on the table. It was in a coffee shop, busy coffee shop, and I'm just recording it on my phone with no microphone. And I'd never do that. I'd never set out to record a podcast just on my phone with no microphone in a busy coffee shop on a table. And but we kept talking for an hour. We didn't stop talking, and it was a really good chat. And I want to share that chat. So I'm going to release that as the first interview episode. It'll be the next episode, because I want to share this complete journey with you. And I'm going to do that by making it better as I go along. I am going to try and video them too, so that you'll be able to see the environment that I'm recording in. You might see some of the equipment or some of the other things that we'll see. I'm not sure if that's a good idea. I'd like to put all of the podcasts on YouTube anyway in audio form. I'm not sure if it's a good idea having the camera, because what I like about podcasts is the intimacy, and I'm worried that the camera is going to get in the way of that. But it's just an experiment, so we'll see how that goes. I think my biggest fear is that this is a podcast about podcasts, and I'm worried that it comes off that that the best idea I could come up with for a podcast is a podcast about podcasts. It feels really route one, but it absolutely comes from a genuine place. I do really want to share the process and share other podcast producers talking about the process in real time. When I got home yesterday, I sat down and I wrote down what I want the podcast producer podcast to be, and it came out like this. I want it to be prolific. I want to meet with as many podcast producers as possible. I want to publish as much material as possible. And wherever possible, I want to make this podcast for free. I want to see if it's possible to start making a podcast with no money, or as little money as possible. I know I've got the camera and I've got a microphone. I'm doing that because I don't have a good audio recording device. So even using the camera for me was my little workaround for making a podcast. I want to do this in a way where anyone can use what they've got to hand to put their podcast idea online. Podcast producers, I think, are anyone involved in making a podcast, even if you're just thinking about doing it. If you're listening to this, you're a podcast producer. Whether or not you've actually got a podcast yet, you're a podcast producer. I'm hoping that if I can keep this going long enough, that anyone will be able to share their ideas or to share tips or to put questions that other people, other podcast producers are facing, and that we'll all help each other out. I want to talk to as many people who have a podcast going to help them find a new audience for their podcasts. And finally, I really want to try and get as many people as possible to make their own podcast. And if I can just stumble through this process and share everything with you, I'm hoping that you'll see that you'll be able to do this too. There's so much, as you know, because you've looked this up, there's so much that you need to get together, and any one person will have certain skills. You might be good at talking to people or booking guests, or you might be good at operating the audio equipment, or you might be really good on the computer, so you might be really good at editing the audio and putting it on a website. You might be really good at social media, so you might be really good at promoting your podcast. But there are so many aspects just to get this thing out of your head and online as a completed podcast stream. I think there are very few people who can do all of that, and I think between us, between however many people are watching this, I think nobody's listening to this podcast. I think no one will listen to this episode. That's what's getting me through actually recording it and uploading it. But if anyone is going to listen to it, they're going to have different skill sets, and they're going to have different ideas, and they're going to have different experiences. And I think the more that we can share those, the better. So that's it. Thanks so much for joining me for the very first podcast producers podcast with Neil Mossey, episode 001. Where do I start to build a podcast? If you've got this far, if you have listened, I don't believe anyone is, but if you have listened to this, I would love it if you were able to say hi to me. There's ways to contact me in the show notes on the audio podcast, and on the YouTube video I've put all my contact details in the description, but you can also leave a comment or give me a thumbs up. Also, I'm taking a guess that you listen to loads of podcasts, so you know the importance of subscribers. So if this is a journey that you might want to come with me on, if it's a journey that you want to share with me, it'd be lovely to see you there as a subscriber. But anyway, I hope this helps. It feels presumptuous of me to ask you if you've got any questions, but if you have got any questions, I'd love to hear them. And let's do this. Podcast Producers Podcast.
Can you please help my daddy get 1,000 subscribers? Just click on his face. Thanks. Bye.